I'm standing under a 9-year-old apple tree. It has 14 apples on it. I pulled out a calculator this morning and did something most people never do. I counted what this tree actually cost me. $50 for the sapling. 9 years of waiting. 400 square feet of yard it took off the table. Water, pruning, a fence around it when the deer showed up. I ran the numbers, and the first apple from this tree cost me $11. Not the average apple, the first one. The one that arrived in year 4. Meanwhile, the bushes I planted the same spring were feeding me by month 18. Different math, different speed, different answer. Most gardening advice tells you to plant fruit trees. Most gardening advice is measured in decades. I want to measure in pounds per square foot per year. Because when you run that number, trees lose badly. Here's the full ROI breakdown nobody calculates. A fruit tree is a bond. You pay up front. You wait. You hope the yield curve eventually justifies the capital. That's the pitch the nursery catalogs have been running for 100 years, and it works because nobody actually opens a spreadsheet. Let me open one for you. A standard semi-dwarf apple tree costs $50 to $80 at a decent nursery. It needs 8 feet of spread minimum. With the root circle, that's roughly 400 square feet locked up. First meaningful harvest arrives in year 3 if you got lucky with weather and pollination. Year 5 is more honest. Average home orchard yield in the first productive window, 20 to 40 pounds. After 10 years, you might see 100. Before then, margin is mostly waiting. Now, the land. 400 square feet of Zone 6B garden. You could run 16 raised beds of greens off that. You could plant 12 mature bushes. You could grow enough tomatoes to can for a year. Instead, for the first 5 seasons, you grow one thing: waiting. Then add the hidden costs nobody writes on the price tag. The fence to keep deer off a young tree, $100 to $200. The stakes and ties for the first 3 years. The copper spray for fire blight. The late frost that wipes out the whole bloom in April and takes your yield to 0 for the year. The pollinator partner you didn't realize you needed, which doubles your original plant cost. The dwarf rootstock that finally produces early but only lives 20 years instead of 80. Every one of those is a line item. Every one of those is money that doesn't show up in the marketing. I watched my own apple tree for 4 summers before I got honest with myself. The forest grows apples too, crab apples mostly. It doesn't plant them in rows. It doesn't prune them. It doesn't bet a season on one crop, because the forest isn't stupid enough to stake a year's calories on a single flowering event. I was. That's when the frame changed. Trees versus bushes isn't a taste question. It's a capital allocation question. And the moment you run it that way, the answer stops being a debate. 3 bushes solve the waiting problem on their own. Haskap, Nanking cherry, goumi. Pick any one and you're eating fruit in month 18. Pick all 3 and you've got a producing hedge in under 2 years. Haskap, also called honeyberry, is the fastest fruiting shrub in cold climates. Blue, oblong berries taste like blueberry crossed with black currant. 4 to 5 feet tall, needs a pollinator pair. Hardy to -40 Fahrenheit. First real crop in year 2. Mature yield 5 to 10 pounds per bush. The flowers tolerate a hard freeze down to about 25 degrees, which means you get fruit in years when apples lose their entire bloom to a late April frost. Saplings run $15 to $25 from Honeyberry USA or Raintree Nursery. Nanking cherry, 4 to 6 feet, drought tolerant, self-fertile for partial production, but better with 2 bushes. Hardy zones 2 through 7. First fruit in year 2. Full yield by year 4, 15 to 30 pounds a bush. Pink blossom, small red cherry, tart enough to need sugar, but lethal in jam, juice, or fruit leather. Grows from seed if you're patient, which skips the nursery markup entirely. Stratify the pits over winter, plant them in spring, get a producing bush in 4 years for $0 of plant cost. Goumi, 4 to 8 feet, silver-leaved, deep red berries the size of a pea. Here's what makes goumi different from the other two. It fixes nitrogen. Plant a goumi next to a young fruit tree, and the tree grows measurably faster, because the goumi is feeding the soil. 10 to 15 pounds per bush by year 4. Flavor is tart-sweet. Kids eat them off the branch. Now the square foot math. 3 bushes at a 4-foot spread each is roughly 50 square feet total. Year 2 yield 10 to 20 pounds. Year 4 yield 30 to 50 pounds. Compared to that apple tree I started with, same $50 of plant cost. 1/8 the square footage, 10 times the first harvest speed, 4 to 5 times the pound yield at year 4. And every one of those bushes will outlive the semi-dwarf rootstock. One historical callback worth knowing. The Soviet-era dacha allotment. 600 square meters, roughly 6,500 square feet. Families fed themselves off those plots year-round through periods when the state food supply collapsed. They didn't plant orchards on the dacha. The ground was too precious. They planted dense bush guilds, black currant, red currant, gooseberry, honeysuckle, sea buckthorn. The system fed 3 generations at scale, not because of ideology, because of square foot math. Bushes win by a wide margin when the plot is small. That's not nostalgia. That's a yield test that ran for 70 years across a continent. Speed is one argument. Pounds per square foot is another. But there's a third number that most garden channels never touch: calories. A pound of blueberries has 260 calories. A pound of apples, 216. A pound of hazelnuts, roughly 2,800 calories. That's 11 times the calorie density of the fruit most people are chasing. If the goal is food security, not snack fruit, this is the number that actually matters. 2 bushes carry the calorie argument: hazelnut and Chicago hardy fig. Hazelnut. American hazelnut grows as a 12-foot bush, not a tree. It produces in year 4. Mature in year 7. 4 to 12 pounds of in-shell nuts a year. Here's the detail nobody highlights. In-shell storage runs 12 months at room temperature. No refrigeration, no canning, no freezer, no electricity. That matters. Every other crop on this list needs a freezer, a canning jar, or a dehydrator to get through winter. Hazelnuts just need a dry shelf. Nutrition breakdown: 18% protein, 60% fat, most of it monounsaturated. One mature bush produces roughly 10,000 calories a year. 5 bushes cover a person's winter fat budget without power, without packaging, without supply chains. A short note from the woods. Hazelnut grows wild in the understory of most deciduous woodland in the eastern United States. Nobody fertilizes it. Nobody waters it. It lives 30 to 40 years, produces every other year, and gets eaten by squirrels who cache it in the ground, which is how it spreads. It survived without any human management for 10,000 years before we started growing it in orchards. That's the baseline performance benchmark. Anything less, and you're worse than doing nothing. Now Chicago hardy fig. This one surprises people. Fig in Zone 5 without a greenhouse. Chicago hardy is a cultivar that dies back to the ground at -10 Fahrenheit and regrows from the roots every spring. It fruits on the new wood, meaning the dieback doesn't kill the harvest. It just delays it by a few weeks into August. 30 to 50 figs per plant in year 3. Self-fertile, so one plant is enough to start. Fresh fig at roughly 249 kilocalories per 100 grams dried. Dry them on a screen in August sun. No equipment, no power, no preservation chemistry. Store them in a jar for a year. Cost of one Chicago Hardy from One Green World or Rain Tree, $20 to $30. Plant it against a south-facing wall. Put 10 inches of wood mulch over the root zone in November. Pull the mulch back in late April. That's the winter protocol. Done right, it produces for 40 years. So the calorie math stacked. 5 hazelnuts plus 2 Chicago Hardy figs. Roughly 70 square feet total footprint. 10 to 15,000 calories a year in fully storable form. No freezer, no canning. No electricity. A single apple tree in the same square footage gives you 4,000 to 5,000 calories. And those calories rot by December unless you process them immediately. The comparison isn't close. It isn't even in the same category. But calories alone won't keep you healthy. You also need the stuff that rots if you don't grow it yourself. And that's where the next 2 plants come in. 2 bushes nobody puts in a fruit tree conversation because they're not fruit trees. That's the point. Rosa rugosa, the beach rose. The one growing wild on every New England coastal dune. Rose hips the size of cherry tomatoes, ripening in October, improving in flavor after the first hard frost. Vitamin C content, roughly 400 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh hip. That's 20 times the vitamin C of an orange, weight for weight. One mature bush produces 30 to 50 hips in a season. A hedge of 3 bushes gives you a winter's worth of vitamin C in dried form, stored in a jar on a shelf. Rose hip powder in 3 steps. Pick when the hips are red and soft. Dry them whole on a screen, 2 weeks in a warm room with airflow. Grind in a coffee grinder, then sift out the irritating hairs and the seeds with a fine mesh strainer. Store the powder in a sealed jar. A teaspoon a day in hot water through the whole winter covers the vitamin C gap that pushed sailors into scurvy for 400 years. Cost after year 1, 0. Goji. The same thing health food stores sell for $30 a pound of dried berries. Goji grows in USDA zones 3 through 10, 5 to 8 feet tall, self-fertile. 2 to 6 pounds of fresh berries a year from a mature plant. Dry them on a tray in the sun. No dehydrator needed. No equipment. No electricity. The leaves are edible too, eaten as a cooking green in parts of Asia for roughly 2,000 years. 1 rugosa, 1 goji. 15 square feet total. A year's worth of the micronutrients nobody ever gets from a supermarket apple. Not at the quantity, not at the quality, and not at the price. Now the piece that finally settled the argument for me. The calendar. Here's what 6 bushes give you across a Zone 6B growing season. June. Haskap ripens first, 10 pounds from 2 bushes. Grocery store organic blueberries, which these taste like, are running $7 to $9 a pint, about $12 a pound. Retail replacement value of the June haskap harvest, roughly $120. July. Nanking cherry hits full ripeness. 2 bushes in full sun, about 20 pounds of fruit. Fresh tart cherries are rare in stores. When you find them, they're $5 to $6 a pound. Retail value, $120. Simultaneously, goumi starts its second wave. 10 more pounds, valued at berry mix retail pricing, another $50. August. Chicago Hardy fig starts dropping. 1 plant in a protected spot produces 40 fresh figs. Supermarket fresh figs at peak season run $2 to $3 each. Retail value, $80. Goji comes online the same month, 4 pounds fresh, drying into roughly 8 ounces of dried berries. At the dried equivalent pricing you'd actually replace at the store, that's $60. September. Hazelnut drop. 4 bushes in their 5th year, roughly 20 pounds in shell, about 12 pounds of nut meat after shelling. Bulk organic hazelnuts run $10 to $14 a pound. Retail value, $140. That's one September drop, paying for the entire starter kit all over again. October, rose hips. 3 rugosa bushes produce roughly 120 hips, drying down to maybe 8 ounces of finished powder. Commercial rosehip powder runs $20 for 4 ounces at any health store. Retail replacement value, $40. November. The figs from August are fully dried and jarred. The hazelnuts are still being shelled through winter. The rosehip powder is ground and stored. No new harvest this month, but the harvest already made is still being eaten every day. Total annual retail value, 6 bushes in their 5th year, Zone 6B, roughly $520 to $600. Planting cost for those same 6 bushes up front, year 0, $200 to $250, including mulch and stakes. Break-even happens somewhere in year 3. Every year after that, the yield is pure offset against your grocery bill. Over 20 years, which is short for any of these species, that's $10,000 to $12,000 of retail food value from $200 of plant stock and maybe 3 afternoons of planting work. Over 40 years, which is within the lifespan of every bush on this list, the number doubles. No inflation adjustment, no compounding, just raw retail replacement. I tracked my own bushes for the full 5-year window in Zone 6B. Not all of them hit the numbers above. Haskap beat them. Nanking cherry was a year slow. Figs surprised me on the upside in year 4 when a mild autumn let the second crop ripen. The point isn't the exact pounds. The point is the shape of the curve. It doesn't look like a fruit tree curve. It looks like compounding. That's not farming. That's a savings account that also feeds you. One question left. If someone's starting from 0, what are the first 3 bushes they plant, and where do they order them? Starter kit for zones 5 through 7. 3 plants, under $80 total. First meaningful harvest in year 2. Plant 1, haskap, 2-variety pair. Why first? Fastest to yield, hardiest to cold, cleanest flavor for someone who's never tasted anything they planted. Order from Honeyberry, USA. They ship bare root in early spring, $15 a plant, and you need 2 different varieties for cross-pollination. Total cost for the pair, $30. Space them 4 feet apart. Lay down 8 inches of mulch around the root zone the same day you plant. Plant 2, Chicago hardy fig. Why second? Highest calorie return, longest shelf life once dried, and it's the one plant on the list that will still feel exotic even 10 years in. Order from One Green World in Oregon or Rain Tree Nursery in Washington. $20 to $30. Plant against a south or southwest wall if your winters are rough. The wall holds daytime heat through the night and pushes your effective zone up by half a number. Mulch 10 inches deep in November. Uncover in late April. Plant 3, goumi. Why third? It feeds the other 2. Nitrogen fixation means the haskap and the fig both grow measurably faster when planted in the same 50-square-foot zone as a goumi. Baker Creek and Rain Tree both carry it, $15 to $20. 1 bush is enough for pollination, but 2 doubles the yield and speeds ripening. $80, 50 square feet. Year 2, you're eating your own haskap. Year 3, figs and goumi come online. Year 5, you're giving away harvest to neighbors. One piece of old practice worth knowing. In the Appalachian Hill Country, small farms running on steep ground never planted orchards on the slopes. The erosion would eat the topsoil faster than a tree could root. Instead, they ran dense bush hedges along the contour lines: gooseberry, elderberry, hazelnut, serviceberry. The hedge held the slope in place, fed the family, and the livestock grazed between rows. One structure, 3 jobs. Anyone who thinks bush-based food production is a modern permaculture idea hasn't looked at a 100-year-old Kentucky hill farm. The starter kit I just described is a modern version of that same system, compressed into 50 square feet instead of 5 acres. Same principle, same math, same result. So what do you actually do with this? 3 steps this week. 1. Measure. Walk your yard. Find a spot, south-facing, anywhere from 50 to 200 square feet, that gets at least 6 hours of sun a day through the growing season. Mark the corners with lags or stakes. That's your starter bed. Not the whole yard, not a long-term plan. Just 50 square feet, right now, this week. 2. Order. 3 plants. The haskap pear from Honeyberry, USA. The Chicago hardy fig from Raintree or One Green World. The goumi from Baker Creek. $80 on a credit card. 15 minutes of ordering. Ship date, bear root in March or April, depending on your zone. 3. Mulch. Right now, before the plants even arrive, dump 8 inches of wood chips or leaf mulch on the spot you flagged. Local tree services drop chips for free if you ask. Call 3 companies, one of them will say yes. The mulch breaks down through winter, and by planting time in April, the soil underneath is soft, alive with worms, and ready for bare root stock without any tilling. That's it. Not a philosophy, not a permaculture certification course, not a 5-year plan. A tape measure, $80, and a pile of wood chips. The apple tree took 9 years to give me 14 apples. The bushes I planted the same spring fed my family by month 18 and have been feeding us every year since. Decide for yourself.